Not like I needed much of an excuse to talk about dragons, but here we go. Hello, adventurers! I am the Welsh DM, the one Welshman whose accent is lost somewhere in his dragon's hoard. Dragons are the archetypal monster in fantasy, the greatest beasts of myth and legend upon the material plane. They are so powerful that the world itself is shaped by their mere presence. But what happens when one of these great creatures dies? Well, there's a concept in marine biology known as whale fall. It is a term used to explain the explosion of life and changing of the ecosystem when a whale dies and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. And a dragon's death is in a similar bracket, a majestic creature of its environment finally succumbing to death, shifting the power of its ecosystem. In TTRPGs, we as GMs regularly put dragons in our adventures and at the bottom of our dungeons to pose a challenge to our players. Yet we rarely consider what happens in the aftermath after the players have stormed the keep and slain the dragon. So today we're going to consider what happens after the how do you want to do this and how the world is shaped and mourns the loss of this incredible majestic creature. This video is part of Monster Week run by Pointy Hat and Ginny D, this year's topic itself being dragons. So if you want to learn more about my favourite creatures, then keep an eye out this week for all sorts of videos that are dropping throughout the week from varying different creators on varying different topics on the majestic creatures that are dragons. Without further ado, let's discuss Dragonfall. Dragons are legendary for many reasons. They're hard as steel scales, their peerless magical gaze, and their great gouts of flame breath. Anatomically, they are impressive. When a large one dies, they provide a veritable wealth of material to create objects with. Many adventurers will want to harvest bits from the dragon to use for their future adventures, such as scales to craft legendary armors or claws and teeth to form knives and short swords. An enterprising alchemist might even have the idea of using the dragon's eyes to give another creature dark vision or the ability to perceive through illusions. And the villainous necromancer might have eyes on the beast's great heart for some fell ritual of some kind. And let's not forget the eggs of the dragon either. While they may not have matured enough to create full dragons, there is still a fragment of the beast's power contained within. In fact, I made a magic item on that very concept as part of my Magic Monday series. There'll be a link to the video somewhere. The body parts of a slain dragon present a wealth of opportunities for downtime projects for players, for plot hook ideas for you as a GM, tradable goods at market, or just opportunities for villains to grow in power. But it's also worth thinking beyond this to the mundane. A large dragon corpse is a veritable buffet for the local scavenging beasts. Have you considered what happens when a pack of hyenas or a flock of vultures start feasting on the carcass of a very powerful magical dragon? Are they transformed by the essence of consuming the flesh, perhaps growing scaly hides to better protect them from hunters, or gouts of flame breath echoed from cawing vulture maws? Maybe this is the origin of dire creatures. As a GM and designer, I'd love to make a list of dragon-transformed beasts, beasts that have consumed the flesh of a dead or dying dragon and now possess new magical abilities. Actually, I'm keeping that idea. None of you can have it. It's mine, dibs, trademark, whatever. My point is, as a GM, reward your players for the act of slaying a dragon with opportunities to use the dragon's bits to improve their lives and make adventuring cooler for them. And then reward yourself with what's left to alter the world and your story. It's worth noting there are a bunch of great resources out there for this very premise, not just for dragons but for all manner of beasts as well. My favourite, the Monster Grimoire from Grim Hollow, contains rules for harvesting creatures, much like kind of that Witcher style. But there's also Helena's Guide to Monster Hunting on D&D Beyond now that contains really extensive rules for this thing. And if you're looking for something a little simpler, go over to the DM's Guild and check out the Monster Loot books, which contains a bunch of options to get from monsters for basically every officially published Wizards monster book. Really great resources, really recommend checking them out, and I'll put descriptions in the link below so you can go check them out for yourself. Speaking of giving your players something for killing the dragon's Hoard. It is an integral part of the lore of dragons that they hoard treasures, gather gold, and store it away from the world. And then when the adventurers come in and slay the dragon, they get to take as much of it as they want. There is plenty of material out there on what to include in a Dragon's Hoard, whether you just use random magic item tables from the DMG or any other third-party source besides. But something worth considering is maybe your dragon didn't hoard gold or jewels. Maybe instead your dragon preferred to hoard knowledge. They gathered tomes of ancient lore and magic to keep for themselves. Or maybe your dragon was more whimsical and preferred to hoard pastries or cool shiny looking rocks. Ultimately, it is up to you as the GM and world builder to decide what is in the Dragon's Hoard, but sometimes it can be fun to subvert expectations from your players and open their eyes to other possibilities. Even if that is just subverting the form that the golden treasure takes. Maybe instead of pure piles of gold, it's 6 beautifully crafted Fabergé eggs that the dragon has secreted away from the world. Or maybe the magical artifacts in the Hoard aren't actually that powerful, but they have major historical significance, and that's what drew the dragon to them. The point I want to make with this video, however, is not about what's in the Hoard, but more to do with what happens to the Hoard after the party have taken their fill. It's highly unlikely that the party is going to be able to fit all of the Dragon's Hoard into their bags. So what happens to the rest? Who benefits from a massive influx of gold into the economy? Do local townsfolk hear of the party's victory and head up to redistribute the wealth among themselves? Or maybe does it turn into a riot as they all fight over the gold? Or do local bandits or nearby cults see the abandoned Dragon's Hoard as a way to advance their nefarious goals, now able to equip themselves with magic items well beyond their previous means? Alternatively, does the local religion build a grand cathedral using the dragon's gold, helping them to convert more of the populace and changing the paradigm of religion within your society? Ultimately, D&D has a running joke that its economy is broken, and there's no greater way to break an economy than a massive influx of money. What does gold, and by extension power, do to those who have long been oppressed by the dragon? What do they do with their newfound wealth? The Hoard of the Dragon gives us an opportunity to explore the socio-economic impact of a dragon's greed, and subsequently the greed of the common man. With all of the gold, treasure, magic items, dragon scales, etc. in the hands of the players, they're over there having fun, counting money. Let's talk about my favourite thing about dragons, at least how they're represented in D&D, regional effects. I am a huge fan of this concept because it perfectly encapsulated the sheer magnitude of magical presence that dragons have within a setting, and how this alters the environment around them. While the idea of a white dragon choosing to live on an icy tundra glacier, or the red dragon burrowing out a cave in a pre-existing volcano is fine, it's much cooler if where a red dragon decides to settle, the earth itself warps, tectonic plates crack, and a volcano erupts around them, brought to life by the sheer power of the dragon's presence. The 2014 Monster Manual actually did this best, in my opinion, with regional effects that altered the environment and became exploration challenges for the players. So when it comes to Dragonfall, the question is what happens when this magical influence begins to fade and the land begins to return to what it once was. Dragons live for centuries, and multiple generations of humanoids will pass within their presence. So they become accustomed to the land as it is beneath the presence of a dragon. So what happens when this way of life is changed? What happens now the great black dragon is slain and the acid swamps that have surrounded the society forever begin to turn back into clear fishing waters? The glorious gold dragon that has protected this community finally breathes its last breath, and suddenly merchants find out they can lie. How does this change the social dynamics of the people? We've mentioned how the dragon's death sees an influx of wealth into the economy, but now cultures are floundering as their very way of life is ceasing to exist. Do we see a mass migration as the land becomes more inhospitable? Or perhaps there is an influx of new people arriving to a new prosperous land? What new flora and fauna begin to enter the environment? Are the new beasts dangerous, or are they a boon to the hunting community? A lot can change when an environment shifts so significantly. What was once considered normal is now gone, and the people must adapt to survive. There is an interesting climate change analogy to this if you're interested in that kind of storytelling at your table. If the dragon was particularly ancient and powerful, the level of change could be quite drastic. And for communities that have gone generations of experiencing a certain environment, this could almost be viewed as the apocalypse. Weather patterns shift, rivers change course drastically, and even the mountains themselves begin to crumble. Such a catastrophe could even see the populace turn on those who slew the dragon, blaming them for the calamity that has befallen them. Are the party actually the heroes they make themselves out to be? Finally, after the corpse has been harvested, the Hoard has been plundered, and the land irrevocably changed back to what it once was, what happens now? Well, for a long time, longer than anyone can remember, the land has been under the controlling presence of a dragon. And whether benevolent or tyrannical, it was a power in the region. A power that is now gone, and something has to fill the void. When powerful entities, whether draconic or humanoid, are vacated from power, inevitably someone else steps in. The question is, who is that in your story? Could the nearby king, with the reclaimed wealth from the dragon's hoard, expand their armies and attempt an audacious land grab? Or maybe the local religion used the site of the dragon's death to build a new temple, to spread their influence and convert much of the populace to their cause. Or maybe simply another dragon sees an opportunity for a pre-existing lair and swoops in on the territory of a former rival. An evil-aligned dragon probably had many enemies in its life that would love nothing more than to swoop in, claim their territory, and continue the reign of terror. Meanwhile, a good-aligned dragon was probably here protecting the world from some sort of great evil, keeping it locked away. But what happens now they're gone? What terrors begin to leak into the world? Something I would recommend you consider within this space is the concept of a dragon versus the dragon. Was this dragon one of many, or one of a kind? Maybe for you, dragons are fairly common, and upon the death of this one, it's not going to be too long before another dragon turns up to claim its lair and begin subjugating the people again. Maybe dragons for you are like hermit crabs, where they just move into vacated lairs and everyone kind of steps up a notch as they all gain a new lair. Alternatively, was this dragon one of a kind? The last of its kind? Or maybe the only ever of its kind? What are the theological or mythological impacts of slaying the world's only legendary black dragon? How does that fight become story? How does that story become legend? And how does that legend become myth? This can be a really fun thing for when you run multiple adventures in the same world, because player characters get to see how their actions centuries ago have now become this legendary story that is told around campfires. Maybe there can only be one black dragon at a time, but as soon as one dies, another one hatches elsewhere in the world, imprinted with a magical memory of those who slew their predecessor, and they are now out for revenge. Power vacuums are real in our world, and in a fantasy world, when a creature of supreme magical power dies, it is only going to be a greater vacuum. So think about that, players, the next time you go around swinging your sword at very powerful creatures. The concept of Whalefall has always fascinated me, and thinking about it in a fantasy context was just a fun thought experiment for me, if nothing else. Dragons are peak fantasy. They are rooted in the tropes of the genre, and their sheer power is something incredibly interesting to explore narratively. We as GMs and storytellers tend to think about the fight with the dragon and making it cool and dramatic. The reason those fights are cool is because of the sheer presence dragons have in the world. So when a dragon falls, whether through old age or at the end of an adventurer's blade, the world shifts. It changes. We can revel in the glory of defeating a terrible foe, but thinking about the ramifications of that actions creates juicy story ideas for us as the campaign continues. Personally, I think it would be a great way to start an adventure. A dragon that has watched over the player's community for centuries breathes its final breath, and suddenly their world is plunged into chaos and upheaval. How do the players deal with this swathe of environmental changes, the encroaching monsters, and the ambitions of power-hungry villains now the dragon is dead? Do they take it upon themselves to find a replacement for the dragon, a new benevolent protector to fill the void and take over the lair? Or do they view this as an opportunity for their culture to thrive, but they want to make sure that no one faction gains too much power and they spend the campaign playing the politics of the world? The point is, there are so many different stories that can come off the back of Dragonfall that I think it's a really exciting concept. I'd love to know what ideas you have in the comments below for Dragonfall based campaigns, whether ones that you've run before or ones that you'd love to take your players through in the future. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and got a sense of the scale of dragons, their impact on the environment and the reliance the ecosystem has on them despite their terrifying presence. As mentioned at the start, this is just one video among many in the community event that is Monster Week being run by Ginny D and Pointy Hat. So if you want to check out more videos on my favourite fantasy creatures, go out and explore. There are going to be dozens out there from all kinds of creators exploring all kinds of content. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like. It helps appease the fire-breathing algorithm that's currently standing behind the camera staring at me. And if you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to hit subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to make sure you never miss a video. Anyway, I do believe that's it for Dragonfall. There is going to be plenty more Dragons content on this channel because, well, it's kind of the aesthetic of a Welshman talking about TTRPGs on the internet. But until we get to that point, you keep an eye out for dragons. I'm going to go diving into my Hoard to see whether I can find my accent. And remember to keep telling stories. I think I spent more time deciding which topic to do than actually writing, filming, and editing this video. I genuinely could have written 4 or 5 videos for this Monster Week. I like dragons a lot. To continue the draconic tyrannical terror. Tyrannical terror is a terrible term. What am I doing?